Sister Connie. Uh,
Sister Connie here on Clubhouse?
so, yeah, on Clubhouse, Sister Connie.
Oh, wow.
And for some reason, she became like my biggest fan. And so she's always making videos. So if you go to
Mhm.
the Prophets Republic Plus on YouTube, 95% of the videos she has are from my lives that I show. So,
Wow.
uh,
Amen. That's good.
The language that he transmitted the New Testament, was it, do you guys believe it was from Greek or from Aramaic?
Well, like I said, it would have been the same situation as you have with the Quran. So the Quran has him speaking in Arabic, and he didn't ever speak Arabic. So whatever he spoke would have been transmitted in whatever the lingua franca is. I don't know. He could have spoken Hebrew. He could have. All that doesn't matter. The only reason why we're on this subject is because you're trying to find a way to have some type of justification for rejecting the Gospels, and also to try to justify the fact that your prophet contradicted the Gospels. It's really just kind of a discursive argument, because God on the day of Pentecost spoke in 16 different languages, which were recorded, right? They all heard the wondrous message of God in their own language, and one of those languages was Arabic. So the first messianic sermon that any Arabic speaking people heard was that Jesus was unalived by crucifixion, rose again, and was divine. It was changed 6 centuries later. So it doesn't really matter what the text was written in. You're just making much ado about something that, is kind of inconsequential.
No, it absolutely matters. I mean, and
It
I've
doesn't matter, because God intended his message to be universal, to have universal scope and universal power. So it would have had to have been written in a language that could be properly translated effectively in other languages.
Are you saying that other prophets like Moses or David were not described as the Son of God?
But were they described as an eternal son?
Yeah, we're talking about the beloved Son, as it's mentioned in the Bible.
Or in Mark that
but remember, Jews would have known that. They would have known it 1,000 years earlier through Solomon.
But
chapter 30, verse 4.
I'm reading this, and Jesus walks on the water, and he ends the wind. He stops the storm while they're on the ship. And then they're like, well, what man can do these things? They don't see him to be God. Like, if they saw him, the disciples don't see him to be God at all. Like, they're just like, this man is doing things. Like, how is he doing all this? Like,
remember, they're going to try to grapple with situations like that based off of their knowledge of their scriptures. When they saw him walking on the water, they would have known that only Yahweh treads the water. They would have known that from Job chapter 9. In chapter 25 of Matthew, verse 31, Jesus says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his throne, glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Well, any Jew who listened to that would have believed Jesus was claiming to be Yahweh. Why? Because only God gathers the nations in the valley of Jehoshaphat and judges them. That's what we see in the prophets, Joel chapter 3, verses 1 through 3.
He even owns
But
the
Jesus
Sabbath
says,
too.
I'm the one who gathers the nations and judges them. See, the reason why you would read a passage like this and not see that Jesus is claiming to be God is because you don't know the prophets. If you knew the prophets, like rabbis do, you would understand that Jesus was claiming to be God, but you don't know him. Micaiah, you should just suspend judgment right now until you obey the Quran and become knowledgeable of the prophets. That's my suggestion to you.
Do you believe in the time of Jesus, right?
Who's the standard is my question.
1 second. How did the Jews understand this term Messiah?
Jews at the same time of Jesus had been waiting for a Messiah who was both human and divine, and who was the Son of Man, an idea they derived from the passage from Daniel chapter 7. Almost the entire story of the Christ with important variations to be sure, is found as well in the religious ideas of some Jews who didn't even know about Jesus. Jesus, for his followers, fulfilled the idea of the Christ. The Christ was not invented to explain Jesus's life and death. Versions of this narrative, the Son of Man story, the story that is later named Christology, were widespread among Jews before the advent of Jesus.
What was the point of him dying for it?
Because we can't be righteous on our own, Christ is our righteousness. As we see in the prophecies of the coming of the Messiah in Jeremiah 23, he is Yahweh Tzidkenu, our righteousness. So just as it was when during the Passover, Christ is our Passover lamb, when the death angel came over the homes of the Israelites in Goshen, whoever had that blood splattered over the top of their doorpost, that angel would pass over them. They were covered by the blood, these basic clichéic terms that you hear Christians use. I'm covered in the blood, right? It's the same thing. Christ is our kapara. He's an atoning sacrifice for our sin. When God sees me, who is sinful, he sees me covered in the righteous blood of the atoning sacrifice, which was his gift to the world. John 3:16.
Yeah. Unlike Christianity, which came up in an environment of critical thinking. I mean, a Greco-Roman world, the philosophical mind is inherently skeptic. With no power, for 3 centuries, the church did its fighting theologically, right? Islam has never been under that type of scrutiny until it started moving west. And then the biggest death nail, excuse me, that I believe the seeds of its own destruction were sown when it decided to, universalize its message through social media. And in return, social media just backfired on it.
Here, let me help you out. Here's the specific verse that you guys use. Chapter 2, verse 79 of the Quran. Surat al-Baqarah, ayah 79.
And what does it say?
It says, woe unto those who write the scriptures with their own hands and claim that it came from God.
Yes.
Right. And all of your earliest medieval scholars say that that's talking about the Talmud and not the Bible. But the first problem that you have is all the prophets were told by Yahweh to write down the message. Moses, Isaiah, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Jeremiah. They all wrote down the scripture with their own hands and said, Hadavar Yahweh. This is the word of Yahweh. So that verse condemns all of the true prophets. By the way in which your prophet was commanded by Allah to follow their guidance, because he gave them a book according to Surah 6, ayah 84 through 90.